Thank you so much for joining us. This is definitely an exciting topic. I also wanted to just mention that the other presentations that have been done during this series, we will still also be having a community of practice with each one of those presenters when we are able to schedule it. But we're going to make it all the way through the series now. And we truly do appreciate you all being a part of this journey with us. So I would like to introduce to you all one of our very good friends. Her name is Chauntel Norris. She is a CLC and a doula. She is a native of Birmingham, Alabama, currently living in Montgomery. She attended the University of Alabama at Birmingham, where she earned her BA degree in African Studies and her BS in psychology. Chauntel is a DONA trained birth and postpartum doula, a Lamaze trained childbirth educator, and a certified lactation counselor. She is the co founder of Baobab Birth Collective and it currently serves as the Mother's Milk Initiative Coordinator for the Alabama Prison Project. She is also a Rose Community Transformer, and we are very excited about that. And has very recently become a grandmother, very recently, as of this month for the very first time. So, welcome to the Grandparent Club, Chauntel, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bug. Thanks for having me and inviting me and allowing me to share the work that we're doing out here with other people. And so maybe other folks can get inspired and perhaps start something in their own community. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Again, my name is Chauntel Norris. I work with the Alabama Prison Birth Project, and particularly I focus on lactation and getting mother's milk to their babies wherever they may be. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so we're going to head on into addressing barriers to breastfeeding among incarcerated women. And as you can imagine, there are several barriers to people who are incarcerated getting their babies their milk. So we're going to talk about that and what we can do to remove those barriers. Next slide, please. First of all, I want to jump in by saying happy Juneteenth. Thank you all for joining us. And for anyone who's not familiar with Juneteenth, it dates back to June 19th, 1865, when the last group of enslaved people found out that they were free, that they had been awarded their freedom through the Emancipation Proclamation in 1862. So some folks, it took them 3 years to get the word that we are free. So that is what we celebrate on Juneteenth. So it's always an exciting time in the African American community. So I just wanted to tell everybody happy Juneteenth and thanks for joining us. Next slide, please. So Dr. Bug introduced me, told a lot about, my background, but I just wanted to tell you who I am. Who is this lady talking to us about lactation and incarceration? What do you know about it? Okay, so I am a certified lactation counselor. I'm a childbirth educator. I'm a peer counselor. But outside of all of my professional roles, I'm a mom, I'm an auntie, I'm a brand new grandma, and I'm also coming from a justice impacted family. So my niece, my brother's daughter, was born while her mother was incarcerated at the prison that I now work at. So that's what drew me to this work and even alerted me to this thing happening. I didn't know that incarcerated people could also be pregnant people, that pregnant people were being incarcerated in this country. I had no idea until our family experienced it. So that's what piqued my interest, especially as a birth worker. When I learned about the conditions of birthing people in carceral settings, I got really concerned and decided, somebody needs to do something about this. And so here I am 8 years, 9 years later, doing this special work. So it's always a privilege to be able to do. Next slide, please. All right. So I just want us all to realize that over the past 30 years, so in most of our lifetimes, the incarceration of women has increased by 700%. We know in community, we hear about, America incarcerates the most people of any country in the world. We know the drug sentencing. We know mandatory, you have to be 3 strikes, you're out. All of these laws have led to a huge increase in the amount of people that we incarcerate in this country. So, of course, it applies to women as well. Next slide, please. So, who exactly is being incarcerated? Let's take a look at that. Let's look at what that looks like. Next slide, please. So 75% of women who are incarcerated are moms, okay? 75%, 3 out of 4. And 2/3 have kids who are in school. They're school-age children younger than 18 years old. So I want you guys to just pause for a second and think about what that means for families. If you were removed from your household, what impact would that have? A lot of women are primary caregivers to their children, their aunties, their grandmas. And so when you remove them from the home, it causes a major disruption. And then what happens? Mom is removed from the home. Who's watching those children? Who's taking care of them? These are all questions. We're going to get more into it, but I just want you to think about that for a moment, what that impact actually means in real time. Next slide, please. So the median income of the average woman who's being incarcerated is less than $14,000. So we're talking about poverty level income. And so think about yourself, your lifestyle, if you have a car note, house note, whatever the things are, could you afford to live on $14,000 a year? And then we also said that 2/3 of incarcerated women have children, school-age children. So you're also raising children on less than $14,000. Just think about what that would look like for your family if that were your reality. Okay, next slide, please. All right, and 90%, this is one of the most astounding statistics to me. 90% of incarcerated women have experienced some form of sexual or physical trauma early in life. So they're trauma survivors. We all know, we've all studied the ACEs. We know the impacts of trauma on human development, and we know that can kind of set the course for your life. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised that at the number of incarcerated people who have had these life experiences. And so as we're putting all of these things, low income, history of trauma, to me, perhaps these women might be better served by better social support, because also all of these things combined often lead to addiction issues. They lead to partnerships that often result in domestic violence, not choosing the best partners, and also crimes of survival. If you don't have a way of feeding your children, you're going to do your best to figure it out, even if it's not always within the legal realms. And so that's what we see when people are incarcerated, is generally related to crimes of poverty, trying to survive, addiction issues, which often is rooted in trauma, and mental illness. Those are the top 3 things that lead to incarceration for women. Next slide, please. All right, so here we're going to watch a short video about our sister program in Minnesota. This is their early years, but it shows them providing doula support to an incarcerated person.
The dichotomy of childbirth is the only way to explain happiness born of such pain.
Okay, big breath to it. One more time.
Hard times are not new to inmate 234961.
It makes me really sad. I didn't imagine I was going to be in prison or jail when I had my child.
First met Cassie Bolio in her cell
at Shakopee State Prison 2 weeks before her baby was due.
I found out the first day I got here.
The intake pregnancy test was mandatory. It followed Cassie's conviction for stealing 2 televisions from the Little Falls Walmart and leading police on a high-speed chase. Her second trip to Shakopee.
All my crimes have been related to drug use.
Tougher drug sentences are a principal reason the population has exploded at Minnesota's Seoul State Prison for women, from 85 inmates at the prison's opening 27 years ago to 657 today. 6 out of 10 are back out within 2 years of arriving, and currently,
So let's get started.
14 of them
Right.
are pregnant.
And how far along are you?
4.5 months.
Until 4 years ago, they were, for the most part,
You know,
on their own.
I guess it seemed wrong to me.
Erica Garrity was a graduate school intern at the prison who returned with a plan.
It shows some diagrams of what your body looks like.
Weekly prenatal education
Breathe.
and support from the other expectant moms
It's Kara.
was just the start.
Come in.
Prison rules prohibit Cassie from having family present at the hospital for any part of her baby's birth.
Oh, good.
Just 2 corrections officers and the medical team. And now, that woman in the ponytail,
So are you feeling that back pain all the time?
Kara Kreuziger, Cassie's doula.
Long, slow breath. I'll breathe with you.
If the notion of a doula, a birth
Slow it down.
coach, is already raising your ire as a prime example of coddling inmates,
I wish we could fast forward this part
take a breath yourself
and breathe it out.
and listen.
The point is, it is benefiting us all.
Erica's privately funded doula program, called ISIS Rising, has tracked 40 inmates' births. In 2010, the year before inmates were routinely assigned a doula, 11 babies were delivered, 7 of them by costly C-sections paid for with tax dollars.
Women would tell each other in the prison, well, if you get a C-section, you get 1 more day with your baby in the hospital. I don't like this. I don't really either.
But with doulas now offering support and education,
You want to go back?
the number of C-sections for the next 29 births? 1.
We're talking about a 3% C-section rate. The national average C-section rate is about 30%.
The hours pass, and Cassie's pain builds. Corrections officers come and go,
Right.
not allowed by prison policy to offer even an empathetic touch. But Kara can. Cassie was 14 years old when her mother was killed in a car crash.
Beautiful. Look, Cassie.
Now she knows what it feels like to be the mother of a daughter, too.
So cute. I'm a proud doula. She did wonderfully. We want to support that happening.
Lori Timlin, the prison's parenting coordinator,
8 pounds, 9 ounces.
believes society benefits when inmates have support before and during their births.
I think about these kids who are being born who deserve to have a healthy mom during pregnancy.
But there are limits. Prison policy prohibits the restraining of pregnant inmates. That status for Cassie has now changed.
Big.
She'll be allowed to bond with her daughter, Zariah, for 48 hours.
I don't want to hold that for you. It's the day that I don't look forward to. None of us do. It's the day we dread. Baby.
For 2 days, Cassie has barely put her daughter down.
Wanted her with me the whole time.
Now her time is up. A young woman makes bad choices. The debt must be paid. Officers are tasked with a duty.
Okay.
And an increasingly familiar ritual is in play. The baby will be wheeled down the hall where Cassie's aunt is waiting to take her home. Cassie is not allowed to meet or even see her aunt. She will spend the next few days in her cell, crying
I think about her a lot while she's there.
No. But a few evenings later,
Oh my gosh, look at her hair.
Cassie will not be alone.
There's a poem on the back from us.
Cassie's release will come sooner than most.
She's just waiting for me to come home.
16 days from this meeting.
I'm okay now.
Nearly all the pregnant inmates at Shakopee will eventually go home to their babies. The hope at the prison is that better births will make better moms, and maybe even better citizens, too.
You will have a doula, you'll have someone there.
Boyd Hooper, Channel 11 News, Shakopee.
Bear with me, folks, as I get us back to our slides.
Okay. Okay, you can go to the next. One more back. Yep. Thank you. All right. So that video was a lot. I'm going to give you guys a second to kind of just digest that. But that was for an incarcerated person. That was a good birth. She was able to have her doula with her. In most carceral settings, no family member is allowed to be present. There's no support. There's a handful of doula programs for incarcerated people in this country. And so the birthing person just doesn't have support. There's 2 officers in the room, which is problematic anyway, right? These are not her friends. These are not her support people. They're there to just do their job. There's no privacy, no dignity in that. Think about everything that happens in the birthing space, in the birthing hospital room, all of the vaginal exams, adjusting the monitors, all of those things where your body is exposed, right? So that is the state of affairs currently in this country. And some of us, have decided, okay, we can do something to make this better. We might not be able to remove folks from incarceration or change their sentence or anything like that. But what we can do is we can be present and we can show up for them and we can let them know that they're not experiencing this on their own. We see what is happening to you and we're going to support you through this the best way that we know how. And so that kind of thinking and thought process led to the Alabama Prison Birth Project. And so our program components are, we have one-on-one doula support. So every birthing person who wants one is able to have her own doula assigned to her. They will meet privately, one-on-one, prenatally. The doula will go to the birth with them and attend them as long as is needed. Even if we have to trade off, she will be fully supported the entire time she's laboring. And then we come back in Alabama, they get 24 hours. So we come back the following day because mom is going to be discharged and they will have to be separated. So we come and on that day, we just do all of the newborn rituals. We take pictures. We, help mom dress the baby. So she's got some cute, or they have good outfit, a cute outfit for pictures. We're allowed to print out pictures and bring them 15 pictures to the facility. So we make sure that we do that as soon as possible. While mom is laboring, we have some community groups who crochet hats and blankets. And so while mom is laboring, we advise her to put the blanket on her chest so it's soaking up her scent. And as soon as baby is born, we put that hat on baby. And so when they have to be separated, that hat that smells like baby goes with mom. And that blanket that smells like mom goes with baby. So we use that when baby is fussy as a comfort measure. We know one of their most developed senses is their sense of smell. And so often that helps to soothe them when they're upset, because you cannot imagine what it's like to have a baby who's literally been ripped from their mother's arms. Like they do get fussy. They do look for their mom constantly. And so this is just, it's not a solution, but it's something to try to help mitigate the harm. We also do recordable storybooks. So moms is recording her voice, and we suggest that caregivers play that, during bath time, during feeding times, when their needs are being met, so that they can associate their needs being met with mom's voice and help strengthen and maintain that bond. So those are some of the things we do in our one-on-one doula support. And then we also have childbirth education, group childbirth education. And then we have our lactation program, and I'm going to dig more into those in the following slides. So next slide, please. So I've already talked a lot about our one-on-one support and what that looks like. And this is on the left, that's me supporting a client whose baby was in the NICU, but I was there for her birth, you know, able to support her. Some of the things we do in the birthing space is, you know, when vaginal exams are happening, I'll hold the sheet up at the foot of the bed so that no one else in the room is able to observe what's happening, you know, just helping to preserve her dignity, maintaining the atmosphere in the room. So if mom needs low lighting, if she needs some soft music, you know, like whatever it is, I'm totally focused on her, and I'm encouraging everyone else in the room to at least, if you're not helping facilitate this, then just sit and be quiet. You know, let us do what we need to do over here. On the right, that's Sarah with one of our clients, and she's doing a prenatal one-on-one, just talking about birth preferences and what this mom needs to feel supported through this process. Another thing that I will say, I say mom a lot, I say women a lot. And the reason I do so, I am not trying to other anyone. I always honor anyone's pronouns and what they prefer. But one of the things that our participants say is, you know, mom is a role that is trying, all of these systems try to remove from them, right? You're an incarcerated person, you're, you know, a bad parent, all of these things. But at the end of the day, they always want to be recognized as moms. And that's something that's continuously being taken away. So I do try to honor that in my language as well. So that's why I'm not trying to exclude anyone, but I am trying to honor the group that I'm working with. Next slide, please. And again, you know, we talk across the country, generally it's 48 hours that incarcerated people get with their babies. But in Alabama, it's actually 24, which is really odd because babies are not discharged until 48 hours. So that last day, they end up going to the NICU so that they have one-on-one nursing care, which could be alleviated if you allow mom to stay her full 48 hours. So just my 2 cents. Next slide, please. So this is a picture of our group childbirth education. And we just collectively, it serves a lot of purposes. One thing that we do in our group is we bring healthy meals. As far as I know, we're the only place in the country that's able to do that, but we work with community partners, church groups, and we cook as well. So, but we're bringing in, we say we like to eat the rainbow. We try to bring in a variety of fresh foods that we know they don't have access to. So green leafy vegetables, salmon, things high in omega-3s, you know, trying to just get as much nutrition into each meal as we possibly can. And also we're doing the childbirth education. So we're going through what's happening in your body. We're playing games. We're just relating to each other as moms, as parents, and enjoying. We say that this is 2 hours every week that you just get to step out of that prison and just be a mom. And we're enjoying each other's company. But another thing that happens in this group is the women really bond with each other as well. So they become an internal support structure for each other. And so when something is happening, let's say a mom is going in labor and the officer is not responding quickly enough, the other moms will rally around and get her the attention and the care that she needs. When she comes back postpartum, all of them understand what that feels like, what that experience is, and they support her inside the prison, in their dorm, in many ways, you know, whether that's giving her Tylenol that they have, giving her extra snacks, or just giving her space. So this is, you know, all unintended consequences of our childbirth education group. Next slide, please. All right. And then our last program component is our lactation program. Well, I cannot say that we're the only place in the country that's shipping milk, because I do know that Michigan is starting a new program. So I want to give them their props as well. But what we do is moms who are incarcerated are allowed to express their milk, and then I overnight ship it to their babies. And I'm sure most of us here are birth workers, so we know the benefits, but I still want to go over the benefits of breast milk. We know that it reduces infant mortality. In that first year of life, it reduces SIDS, respiratory infections, leukemia. It helps improve their immune function. reduces chronic illness, diabetes, asthma, ear infections, and it also is helpful for moms. This is one thing that a lot of people, clients that I serve, are not aware of. They always want to do what's best for babies. And then I remind them that, hey, it has benefits for you too. It helps, decrease your risk of breast cancer, high blood pressure, ovarian cancer, osteoporosis, all of the things are benefits of the breast milk and reasons why you might want to consider participating in our program. And also as we're talking about the decrease of SIDS and infant mortality, we know that being separated from mom increases that risk, right? So just off the bat, you're helping your baby, decrease their risk of having a demise within the first year. And so when I talk to moms, just laying out the benefits, we talk about, do they want to participate or not? All I do is give them the information. And the majority are deciding to participate because they want to do what's best for their babies. So regardless of any mistake or misstep that was made in the past, they're still trying to show up as best they can for their babies. And I always remind them that this is something only you can provide. Your milk is specifically designed for your particular baby. And there's nothing, like grandma might be able to buy clothes, uncle might buy a bouncy seat, all of the things that other people are able to do. But this is the one thing that is your unique contribution. Next slide, please. All right, so let's get into the nuts and bolts of what does it take to run a lactation program. So we had to develop several partnerships. I have another slide that's going to get into that. But some of the things that we have to keep in mind when we're thinking about developing a program, a prison or a jail is always their first thing on their mind is safety and security. Like, we got to be safe. And if I can't do this in a safe way, then we're not going to allow this programming. So you have to be able to speak to, how does this keep the prison safer and secure? First of all, it's trauma-informed care. It's evidence-based. It also leads to better mental health outcomes. Any person who has been immediately separated from their baby unwillingly is bound to have some mental health decline. And so this helps to, improve mental health outcomes. Also, it helps to regulate hormones. And all of these things are going to lead to better behavior. So if we have someone having a mental health crisis, or their hormones are just all out of whack, sometimes there's postpartum rage is something that we see in this setting a whole lot. And so when we can talk to corrections officials about how breastfeeding will help decrease some of those things, we usually can they're usually more open and willing to get on board with the idea. Also, it saves costs. Breast milk is, no monetary costs versus formula. And then we talk about the healthcare, less ear infections, less problems with asthma, less problems with obesity, diabetes, all of those things. And so one study, 95 studies, estimated that if you breastfeed, you're saving about $475 in that baby's first year of life. So that's a savings. That's one way to, push it like, hey, let's do this. Also, it's going to save costs for mom. She's not having to, caregivers, I would say caregivers, they're not having to spend as much funding on, medicines, doctor's visits, all of those things. And also, some of the benefits are, it's going to increase the likelihood of recruiting future breastfeeders. So what I mean when I say that is everyone who breastfeeds or at least gets that education, they're going to be released back into community. And when they're going to share that information with somebody, even if they choose not to do it themselves. When their cousin gets pregnant, sister gets pregnant, whoever, like, hey, have you thought about breastfeeding? I know a little bit about that. Maybe you want to think about it. These are the things that I know. And so each one teaches one. And that's something, even within our program, within the facility, when we have moms who are kind of on the fence, like, I don't know about that. The other moms will talk to them and say, hey, you probably want to participate. This was my experience. It was really good, et cetera. But they're sharing information with each other. Also, it provides a prison culture change. And what I mean when I say that is the officers, they take notice. They notice. So of course, when you're on an exclusive pumping schedule, you try to keep it with baby's feeding schedule. So every 2 to 3 hours, you should be pumping. And so the officers see this mom, wow, she's dedicated. She's even getting up in the middle of the night and going to the pumping room, and wow, she's losing sleep. She's dedicated to this. She'll miss a mealtime. She'll do whatever it takes to get over there and express her milk. And so the officers start noticing that. And there's one particular male officer who often works in that area, in the healthcare area where the pumping room is located. And he knows probably just about as much about lactation as I do. Like, as far as, oh, so-and-so mentioned her supply was down, and I made sure that I went and got her extra water, you know, like a water jug that she can keep with her so she can stay hydrated, because I know it's hot here. It's in the summer, you know, like those kind of things, just being thoughtful. And 10 years ago, I assure you, that would not have been happening at that facility. And it might have been frowned upon, you know, if anyone expressed any type interest in that way. So it is changing prison culture a bit. And when they see us treating these women with humanity and being good to them, just treating them like normal human beings, that kind of gives them permission to do the same. And then another thing that we always try to sell to corrections folks is, when people are more connected to their children, they have lower recidivism rates. So they're not coming back and forth through that revolving door as sometimes people do, because they're connected to their children. They want to be in community with their children. And so this is just another way that we support that. Next slide, please. All right, so program development. How do we get started? So first of all, we were invited by the Department of Corrections in 2014. Julia Tutwiler Prison, which is where I work, there was a lawsuit filed against them and a judgment by the Justice Department. It was one of the top 10 worst prisons in the United States. And so they got, I think there's 44 improvements that were required for them in this lawsuit. And so they had to provide gender responsive and trauma informed care. And so one of the healthcare workers, a nurse in their healthcare team, said, hey, you know, I saw this special about doulas in Minnesota. Maybe we can do that here in Alabama. And so that was our foot in the door. That was our invitation to come in and do the work. It was prompted by a judgment, and Department of Corrections reached out to us. So that was our first partnership. Of course, they had to allow us access. That was the first step. But then we looked at who can we partner with in community? Because at this point, we don't have any money. Like we haven't gotten our first grant. We just have a dream. We a desire, a want to make things better. And so we partnered. The Saley Fund is a community foundation, and they gave us our first grant to be able to purchase supplies for the pumping room that we needed. We also partnered with the Alabama Breastfeeding Committee. They donated some funding so that we were able to purchase a freezer, a deep freezer, a stand-up freezer, so that all of the women are able to store their milk. Connections Breastfeeding, Medela and Amita. I know, you know, there are questions about working with other companies. However, we had zero money. And so they donated pumps and all of the supplies, the storage bags, the pads, like anything you could need to be successful with pumping. Between those two, they donated to us at no cost. So we were glad to get those, because otherwise we don't know how we would have been able to make it. Next slide, please. All right, and then we had to develop a policy. So we talked to the Department of Corrections. Hey, we want to do this thing. What do you guys think? Are you willing to be open? And they were like, yeah, we're willing, but it's going to take a lot. We got to get this policy down. We got to focus on safety and security, you know, all the things they will say. And so we partnered to create a policy with community members as well as prison folks. So we had an RN who's also an IBCLC on our board. So she partnered with us to do the, you know, what's medically necessary. What do we need to have a successful pumping program? We also had to get with the corrections team healthcare providers, because that's where our pumping room is housed. So we had to get them on board, make sure that we're all, you know, on the developing a protocol. So like making sure the freezer temp is always right. They have to sign off on that. Making sure the freezer is locked. The healthcare team has the key so that no one has access to that milk. What else? Making sure log sheets are filled out. So every time corrections unlocks the freezer to put the milk in so that it can freeze, there's a log sheet that the nurse is signing off on as well as the client. So just developing those protocols. And then also as far as programming, you know, we consulted with several lactation folks. So we had an RN on staff, a DNP, you know, a wide, because we just wanted to make sure we weren't missing anything. So we consulted with all of these people, a pediatrician. And then to me, the most strenuous part of it was working with the corrections legal team. That was the most tedious part of this process. And it took maybe a year and a half to get things cleared with them after we had all the policy in place. Like, don't expect something like this to pop up overnight, because corrections is notoriously slow moving. And so you just have to put on your patience hat when working with them. Next slide, please. All right, and then the cost of the lactation program. I think I saw a question about that. It is relatively inexpensive to start. Like, our first year, we spent less than $10,000 from implementation to the end of the year. What you need to implement, of course, you need pumps. We use the hospital grade pumps. We have a freezer. We have one of those utility sinks so that they're able to wash their supplies. And then they have individual lockers. And so in their lockers, that's where it's safe for them to keep their baby pictures, the baby hat, you know, all tools that they'll use to help them think about their baby and help stimulate that milk production. So those are the majority. It wasn't a lot that we required. People who live at the prison, incarcerated people who live at the prison, actually decorated the room. So they painted it. One of the nurses there at the prison made curtains for the room. Like, it was a community project for sure. We reached out to community. They donated rocking chairs, you know, and artwork and things like that to just make it a pretty and welcoming space. So definitely, if you're thinking of building up a program, definitely reach out to your community, because they will support you in ways that corrections may not, because they believe in it as well. I think when we all realize what the reality of the situation is, we all recognize that, oh, this is a harmful process. You know, what can we do to make it better? Yearly maintenance costs, really what we're paying for, the biggest cost is shipping, because we overnight ship it to wherever they may be. So that can be a little costly. I want to say the most that I've spent on one mom, and she had a very good supply, was like $200 for the week. And I'm shipping once a week. So just keep that in mind as you're making your estimates and thinking about moving forward. Also, you're going to pay for staff time. So whatever that hourly rate is that you agree. And then supplies. And when I say supplies, the main thing that I'm purchasing is breast milk storage bags. I mean, yes, you buy the pads and things like that in between. But now that our program is more mature, you know, we've run out of the things that were donated. And so now we're purchasing. But those are the biggest things. Like, it's not extensive. It's not cost prohibitive. And there's really no reason why we can't be doing this everywhere. Next slide, please. All right, so participation in our pumping program right now, we are at about a 75% percentage rate. And what I will say is that also includes COVID. So there was an amount of time that we weren't able to reach our clients. So we weren't able to do hands-on lactation support. We weren't able to, you know, even come into the facility at all. So like to assess what supplies are there, make sure everything is working properly. So there was a period of time that pregnant incarcerated people were coming through, but we weren't able to access them. So right now it's at 75%. Prior to COVID, I want to say it was about 83%. So went down a little, and we'll continue to work on that. Next slide, please. And so this is one of our program participants, and this was a comment for her. So I just want us to think about how life-altering these type opportunities can be when you're in a really destitute place. And she was talking about the program, and she said, some may think it's sad, but to me, it's keeping me present. She's talking about the process of pumping. She said, I get cold, mean, and hard when I've lost my other kids. but now I can't block her out. She's always on my mind. I'm so glad I did it. Right. And I've not heard anyone that participated in the program say, I'm sorry I did it. I wish I wouldn't have. So I will let her commentary speak for itself. Next slide, please. All right, and so some of the other things, so we've talked about lactation and all the components of our program, but I wanted, and I saw a couple of comments about other things going on in the community, so I wanted to talk about what else we've been up to. So Alabama Prison Birth Project falls under the Ostara Initiative nonprofit. We, in 2022, did our first prison doula certification. So there is a prison doula certification. It's an advanced training. So you have to already be a doula, and then you can get an additional title of prison doula. And it's a 3-day training. We'll be holding it again in the fall. So we've been able to hold it. This will be our 5th training, I think. So we're able to train people so that they can do this and go out in their own communities and do this work as well. We don't want to just be a gatekeeper. We want to share this. And as long as people are birthing in custody, we want to have some type of intervention everywhere that is possible. Next slide, please. And that was our first cohort of prison doulas. So they will all be going to their community. And just looking at this picture, I think 4 or 5 now are actively working in their own programs in their own states, building their own programs. So next slide, please. We also worked on legislation. So I saw someone mention, I think it was Janet, mentioned about shackling and anti-shackling laws. So in that video that we saw, the mom, as soon as she had baby, she was shackled to the bed. Probably about 2 years after that video was made, Minnesota passed legislation to do away with shackling. Also in 2022, yes, it was 22, here in Alabama, this is a picture of us with the governor. We also passed our anti-shackling legislation. So here it is now illegal to shackle a pregnant or postpartum person, and postpartum being considered those first 6 weeks. So anytime in transport, they should not be shackled. If there is, one caveat, if she's a threat to herself or anyone else, but they have to write a whole report. Like, you have to really, if you're going to do it, you got to have a real good reason. So I am thankful that we were able to get that legislation passed. And, we worked on a few other legislative things. In Minnesota, they actually did pass a law that says they will look at community alternatives as opposed to incarceration. So if someone has an addiction issue in their pregnancy and they're due to be incarcerated, we're going to look at, can we get her in a treatment facility? Can we get her somewhere else in community as opposed to having to be incarcerated? So they're slowly working towards ending the practice of prison birth there. And hopefully we can continue that across the country, because just looking at who is being incarcerated and why, we know that they would definitely benefit more from community support instead of incarceration. And I also want to share, people who are incarcerated, who are seeing, they're doing 2 years or less. Generally, the average is within 6 months of having their baby, they're being released back into community. So I want us to think about the harm and the damage that is caused by separating mothers and babies. Sometimes it's irreparable. And we're doing this so somebody can serve a 6-month sentence. Make it make sense. Okay. All right. Next slide, please. Also, we've been working, writing, just trying to get the word out and encourage other folks to do this well. And we wrote an article for Women's Health, Justice for Incarcerated Moms Act of 2021. So in the Momnibus, there was a part about incarcerated moms in the proposed Momnibus legislation. And so this is just our reflection, going through it about, maybe some improvements or things that could be done differently, just to ensure that birthing incarcerated people are having a better experience if they have to be incarcerated. Okay, next slide, please. All right, and then these are our sources. The slides will go out to you. Next slide, please. All right, and we can end here. Does anyone have any questions? And this is just my contact information. You can always shoot me an email, go to our websites, check us out, see what we're up to. We try to keep those things updated if anyone has any questions. But I also want to open the floor. I've seen the questions. I haven't been able to focus on them, as they're streaming down. So I do want to set aside some time to dig into those.
Chauntel, there was one earlier on about prison nurseries and asking if there's still only 9 prison nurseries that you know of, or maybe a little insight on that.
Yes. So that was one of the first things we asked about when we started our programming was, is that a possibility? And the response was, the facility is so old, there's no place that they could responsibly house babies. So the only way we would get a nursery program here is if they built a new facility, which is not on the agenda. Other places, so when we ask the women, because I always tune into the women, like, what do you need? What do you want? And it's about 50-50. Some of them say, I never want my babies to come into this horrible place. And I don't care if I get to stay with them. I don't want them here experiencing that. And then others are, man, I would do anything to be able to stay with my baby. So, and that's just tuning into the women. That's not my opinion. That's just what they tell us. So, and I see both sides, right? Like, I get it. For those who would prefer not to have them come, and some women, prefer their babies not to come to the prison, even, for regular visits. Just they're trying to shield them from that part of their experience. And I understand. So they exist. They are far and few in between, and they are very regulated, meaning you have to meet certain criteria to participate. Like your out date, the day that you leave, has to be a certain time. So if you had like a 10-year sentence, you may not be eligible to participate. If you have any disciplinary issues, so you get in a yelling match with somebody in your dorm, you're now no longer qualified. Like, and it could be, it's so up to somebody else, right? Like, it's so, sometimes it can be even a little random about who gets to participate. If the officer who's over the program doesn't really like me or get along with me, then I may have problems accessing that programming. So yes, they have them, but everyone, I would say at least half of folks who are pregnant and going through this experience do not qualify for the programming.
There's another question, which is really I'm sure there's a very simple answer to. How does one get such a program started?
Man, listen, you got to come to our doula program. You got to come to our doula training. We're having one here in Montgomery in November. But it's the number one thing I would say is developing relationships with corrections folks, because they got to let you in the door. And if they decide they don't want to, like here in Alabama, again, I will reiterate, it was legislation that made them and forced them to have to create change. It was not because we're all loving people and we love the pregnant people and we want to make sure they have good experiences. Okay. And once they let us in, now we see what's going on, right? So there's a different level of accountability. You can't just do everything you've always done in the dark, because somebody outside is coming in and holding you accountable to a different standard. So I will share those things. Sometimes it is difficult to access, but I will also say, look at who you know in community who has a relationship with the correction facility. So if you're in social work, do you know the social worker at the prison? Do you know the social worker, at the hospital where they give birth? Like, what kind of relationships do you already have that you can leverage? Do you work at the hospital where they give birth, right? And maybe that could be your end to have that conversation with corrections. But what I would say is just explore what relations or who may know somebody in corrections, but it's all relationship based. You got to get your foot in the door first. And so sometimes I got to smile at folks that I can't stand because I know they low down. But if that means I'm going to have access to the people who need it, then that's what I'm going to do.
So I wanted to ask you, you said the programs got its start sort of 2014. You said it took about a year, so 2015. So tell me, can you see a significant difference in sort of the landscape of the prison system now, since you all have been there for a while? And then follow-up question, tell us about going to the hospitals and being that mother's doula.
Ooh, child. Okay, let's get into it. So, so I will say, you talk about a change in the prison landscape. So before we did our first birth, the officers always giving us a side eye, like, oh, here come these woo-woo ladies. I don't know what they up to. I don't even know why they here, but whatever. We gonna do it because they say we gotta do it, right? That was the attitude. And so, but after the first birth, the female officer who was in the room said, you know, I was real suspect of you guys. She was like, but now that I see what you do, all the things I can't do, you know, like I'm still, because they're still human beings, right? Like, even though they got on this mean face or whatever, on the inside, it's hard to witness a mother being separated from her baby. And so she told me, she was like, I get it now. I understand. She's like, I'm glad you're here because you do all the things I can't do. That she can't hold their hand. She can't rub their back. She can't give them a hug. And so she understood right off the value of that. And then, you know, by me practicing loving on these folks and being kind to them and making sure their needs are met, I give the other people in the room permission to do the same. Within the first year, there was this officer and he was hard. I mean, he was mean, you know, like, he's follow the rules. He, you know, straightforward. He don't play the radio. And I came for separation day, and mom was up. You know, they had just brought her breakfast tray in, and I saw this man push the bassinet like he had just been stone cold the day before. He came in, and when I was coming in the room, he was pushing the bassinet close to the bed so mom could put that baby down. He put a tray in front of her over her legs, you know, so that she could access her food. Like, dang, you know, like, okay. So, you know, we talk about unintended consequences. Just when people see you behaving well, it encourages them to do so as well. And they know if they get out of line in the room, you know, if they're doing something inappropriate, it's going to be reported. You know, somebody else is witnessing that other than the incarcerated person. So that's the culture change. Now, what was the second part? I'm sorry, Dr. Bug.
About like when you go with a mother to the hospital to have her baby, like what is your experience?
Yeah, so what I will say, I think it's a lot of things come into it. We're in Alabama, we're down in the South. We don't always, our hospitals don't always, their default is not always best practices. I will say that. I'm being trying to be nice. Okay, so and that's just a birthing experience for anybody here. You know, like, I don't advise anyone to go into hospitals here in Alabama without an advocate with you. I don't care if you broke your ankle or you having a baby. You need somebody with you because odds are high that you will be mistreated. And I am speaking from personal experience within my own family, and I got all the credentials. So if I can experience what we experienced in the birthing space, it's going to be hard for other folks who don't even know what to look for. And so walking that line, and at this particular hospital, there's a doula agreement, right? Which essentially says we'll throw you out the room whenever we feel like you're out of line. So if that means I gave my client too much information about pain relief, and the nurse felt some kind of way about that because she didn't provide the information, now we got a problem, right? And we've signed, the only way to be in that space, you have to sign the doula agreement. And I'm going to do it every time because my client needs me to show up. I don't want her alone. And also, I'm walking that tightrope, trying to make sure I don't do anything that could be misconstrued as being out of bounds or out of line for a doula as a birth worker. So that is the climate here in birthing spaces.
Do you offer these services for teen mothers?
So right now, Alabama Prison Birth Project is just focused on incarcerated folks. We do now. I also do community births, and of course, you know, I've done childbirth ed at local high schools. I've supported, you know, teen clients in that way in my community capacity, but not with our prison birth project, unless, you know, we got an incarcerated young person in.
Yeah, that's what I think. That's what they're meaning. You know,
oh yeah,
you know, it could be, you know, probably in most cases a different facility.
Absolutely. Usually they're in juvenile, but sometimes, very rarely, they will make their way to adult facilities. I see one question: how many are able to go right back and join their babies versus babies being in foster care and needing to go through a process? So in the state of Alabama, if you've ever had a child in foster care, or we call it DHR, Department of Human Resources, if they've ever gotten any of your children, then they're going to get all of your future children. So that's just automatic. If you've ever had any involvement, off the rip, they're coming to get them. Highly problematic. We won't even dig. We don't have enough time to dig into all of the problems there. Ideally, there's a family member. You know, when DHR is not involved, first we look for family placement. So ideally, you know, another family member that could be the father of the child. You know, another relative, cousin, auntie, grandma, whatever. And so those, you know, the connection usually happens pretty quickly. You know, as soon as they can get out. There are some who don't have caregivers, someone who's able, I mean, think about it. How many of us, if somebody say, okay, tomorrow I need you to get a brand new baby, like how many of us are prepared for that? You know, how many of us can pass a home study? Like they coming in and see, you know, do you have those little plugs for your outlets? Do you have sharp corners? You know, just, it's a whole lot to be able to even qualify to receive the child. And so everyone doesn't have that. There is a children's home a few miles from the prison that provides that service. They keep them, you know, as long as mom is incarcerated, and ideally reunite them. I will say also it's a religious organization. So sometimes things don't go. I'm not saying because it's a religious organization. What I'm saying is there's not much regulation of this children's home. And so that reunification doesn't always happen. It's really at their discretion. So again, another problematic practice. I know we just have a couple minutes. I don't want to go.
Yeah, we've
go
actually
ahead.
come to our time. So what you all can do is send us questions and we can get them to Chauntel so that she can answer your questions. And also remember, we do still we'll have an hour sometime in the future for a community of practice for her to just get together and talk with whoever is interested.
Absolutely.
Janet, anything else I need to
No,
say?
just thank you so much. That was fabulous. And I can tell by
Really was. Thank
I
you
can tell
so
by the
much.
chat that many agree. And so thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yes.
Chauntel.
Thank you. You guys have a good day.